Cheryl, and we created this podcast as the Adult Leadership Advisory Board, or ALAB. Who we are in terms of ALAB is a group that focuses on issues, challenges, and difficult topics facing our community. We are working hard to develop educational programming, social tools, and fundraising initiatives to inform, include, and support adults with cystinosis, but ultimately anybody in our community, our friends, our families, our neighbors, and anybody that might or might not be affected by cystinosis. We, as the Adult Leadership Advisory Board, are funded and work under the Cystinosis Research Network. For those of you out there who might not necessarily understand or know what cystinosis is characterized by the accumulation of the amino acid, or one of the amino acids, cysteine, within the cells. When the cysteine builds up in the cells, it often forms crystals and will sometimes attack certain organs and tissues, predominantly the kidneys, but also includes the eyes, muscles, thyroid, brain, pancreas, and testes. Previously, it was known that an individual born with cystinosis would not live past 10. It's pretty grim, and I'm sure many families out there were quite devastated when they had a newborn who was diagnosed with this disease, cystinosis. However, today we have members in our community living well past 50 years old.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cystinosis Rare, Journey into the Unknown. In this episode, we would like to discuss health choices and how to know which directions to go. We have with us today a special guest, Talya Miron-Shatz, PhD. She wrote, "Your life depends on it, what you can do to make better choices about your health." She is a senior fellow at the Center for Medicine in Public Interest in New York, a professor at Ono Academic College in Israel, and a visiting researcher at the University of Cambridge.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'll start off with the first question. I'm Steve. The first question we wanted to ask you was just to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Describe your background and your specialty and your expertise.
So, hi, thank you so much for inviting me. First of all, it's great meeting you, and I'm honored actually to be speaking with you, and I hope to be able to help whoever listens. If I help one person, that's amazing. That's already amazing. And I guess that's part of the reason why I'm here, why I'm in this profession. So I started out with a master's degree in organizational psychology. I did that for a long time. I got bored, believe it or not. I was raising 3 kids. How I got bored, I don't know, but I did. I was like, this isn't challenging anymore. I want to do more. And I started a PhD program in decision making, which I loved. It was so clear cut. I was like, I know what experiment I can do. I know the design, X by Y, and very neat, organized. And I did that, and that was great. But during my studies, I was invited to teach a class on medical decision making, on the psychological aspects of medical decision making to genetic counseling students. And that was amazing, eye-opening, challenging, everything, because I did not know, I can't even say I did not know much. I did not know anything about this. So I had to learn from scratch. And I did. And I said, but wait, what does it look like? What does genetic counseling look like? I've never been to a session. Can I come? And they invited me, and I sat in on a number of consultations with someone who was wonderful. She's still wonderful. We're still friends after all these years. And she was so smart and so knowledgeable and so patient, like nothing like the healthcare professionals who took care of me when I was younger. Perfect. But the encounter, I was sitting there and I was thinking, there's so much information. She knows so much. There's a couple coming in for consultation. What are they going to remember? Do they understand? There's so much to know. And what are they going to what's the take-home message? Will they remember it? Will they be able to convey it? And it's 2 of them, it's not just one patient. And they couldn't hear well. They had a translator, they had a baby, and there was a messy situation with the best of intentions, but still difficult. And I thought, wow, that's really hard. That is just so hard. There's an encounter here, and it's like there's a desk, but there's a hole in the middle of the desk, and the information flows from the healthcare professional to the patient, boom, falls on the floor, 10% gets through, the other 90%, I don't know, they get your shoes wet. It's messy, and it's such a shame. And really, she could not have been a better person. It was just very challenging. So I guess that stuck with me. And then I went on to do my postdoctoral work. I was amazingly invited to work with Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman at the University of Princeton. And we worked on happiness together, but I did feel that medical decision-making, was gnawing at me. It was telling me, come on, you can make a difference. Am I making a difference? I don't know, really. I try. That's all I think that's all we can ever do, is to really try. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I've been doing medical decision-making for almost 20 years now, in various ways and capacities, about breast cancer, Alzheimer's, a number of diseases and conditions. And my mom says, but why? I'm like, I know, it sounds such a depressing list of things to be studying. But I also study unplanned cesarean deliveries. Because it's interesting, and I feel that it's important. Am I helping? I don't know. Am I trying? For sure. That's a very long answer to the whole question of where am I coming from.
No, I appreciate it. I really, really enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really comprehensive. And speaking as someone who has to make those kind of medical decisions all the time, I think it will be helpful for me and others. And there's so much there. I went through it once, but I feel like it's something I can keep going back to and get more out of.
Thank you. The book is called Your Life Depends on It: What You Can Do to Make Better Choices About Your Health.
Yeah, it definitely had a lot of information. For instance, when you talk about system 1 and 2, could you explain more about those systems for people who haven't read your book yet?
Absolutely. So this is almost the premise of behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is a really cool way of saying, let's look at how people actually behave, actually think, actually decide, not what's the right way to decide, what's the optimal, scratch that. What happens in reality? And in reality, we can think of our mind as hosting two systems. One is system 1, and it's the first one that comes to mind. It's quick and dirty, like you go to a food festival with your friend or food trucks. What are you going to have? You pick something. You're like, oh, short ribs, great. I like brisket, amazing. Hamburger, yeah, let's split. Okay, you go get those, I'll grab beers. Done. We are done. Have we considered everything? Was this the most comprehensive decision-making process? Absolutely not. Was it effective? Yes. Was it quick? Yes. It was based on, let's find an answer. Let's find it quickly. Let's look at some information. Let's examine our emotions. For example, oh, brisket, I love brisket. Done. We have made a decision. That is system 1. So we have a little bit of information and we have some emotion. If you're an advertiser, you already know this and you're using it to sway people's emotions. And that's system 1. System 2 is the more elaborate one. It's the one that takes longer to use. It's the one that uses up more cognitive resources. So if you go to a food fest and you're with your friend and you're looking at the menu and you're examining every offering and thinking, oh, this is with yuca. What is yuca? Do I like it? Your friend is like, dude, it's a small piece. It doesn't matter. Move on. But you're belaboring every piece of information. That is system 2. Now you could say, wait, we're talking about medical decisions here. Why are we even discussing system 1? I mean, clearly the choice of medication, treatment, etc. It's not a brisket. I mean, it's not something you just say, oh, this is disgusting, and you throw it and you take something else or you go home hungry. No, there are real consequences here. It matters. It totally matters. And of course it does. But the thing is, our minds are geared a certain way. It's a lot easier for us to make decisions using system 1. And it is also more likely to happen when our mental resources are depleted. For example, when we are in pain. Pain hijacks you. You're like, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. Maybe you have time for another thought in between, maybe if you're lucky. But it's really difficult. Likewise, if you're very hot, if you're very hungry, these things overtake us. If you're really scared, if someone has just given you a diagnosis, whoa, that hits you like a ton of bricks. And how are your mental capacities doing now? Not so great, let me tell you. And it doesn't matter who you are. That's the thing. It doesn't matter. You can be the smartest person in the world. You were just hit by a ton of bricks, or you're in a lot of pain. You're more likely to use system 1. So understanding this distinction is very important, because it helps us understand what we use, how we think, how we decide, how we choose. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I work with advertisers. I work with pharma. I work with people who develop medical devices, and they need to talk to people like us, to the consumers, also to physicians, using system 1 and also using system 2. That's fine. And I do managerial training, and we talk about system 1, system 2, and they say, I've been using what you taught us. I'm like, okay, another day, another dollar for you guys, and that's great. But that really is how we think. So we can't berate ourselves for saying, well, I just took what the doctor told me, or I just glimpsed the brochure. Yeah, you did. You just used system 1, and that's fine because you're human. Was that the best way to decide? I don't know. Does it make sense that you chose that way? Yes, absolutely. System 1, system 2. I want to say one last thing about that. In my book, I wrote about cancer treatments and cancer centers. And I quote a study that someone did there, just looking at their commercials, and they say things like, hope, we give you hope, and it's wonderful, but is it false hope? How many people will benefit from those treatments? You know, it's a very boring question, and it seems heartless, but I think what is heartless really is to sell people hope that is not based on anything. So that's where system 1 can be abused.
Yeah, that is relatable, because you see all these commercials for like medications, and in the background you can hear, may cause headaches, may cause nauseous, make you nauseous, may give you high blood pressure, or a heart attack. But in the picture, they're showing people are happy and walking around and everything's great, but not everybody hears the side effects. But me being a patient, I hear the side effects before I see that picture of the happy person walking around.
Yeah.
It's incongruent, and your mind processes the picture before it processes the content.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about how your mind gets hijacked when you're in pain to be in system 1, I have that happen all the time. Yeah, definitely. I know I should sometimes think more about some of these decisions, but it definitely gets to that mode where I just want to go to bed and sleep for like 10 hours until I feel better.
I believe you. I believe you. Look, it's hard. It's just hard. Saying it isn't is lying. Really.
Yeah. And some of the problems that I have when I go into the doctor's office is sometimes they use I call it medical jargon, so I can't understand it. So I don't understand but most of the time I'll try and get them to explain, but most of the time they just kind of glaze over it. And so I'm left there thinking, okay, I guess I'll Google it when I go home and find out what you were trying to tell me.
You can, and you do, but I think that is such poor practice on the behalf of the physicians for a number of reasons. First of all, it does not help your relationship with them, your level of trust with them, your level of feeling that you're cared for sure. They shouldn't speak above your head. You're an intelligent person. For sure, they should be able to explain things to you. You know, when people need to tell me stuff that I don't understand, I say, think that you're talking to your aunt. You have a nice aunt. She's intelligent. She doesn't understand engineering at all, but she's your aunt. You got to respect her. You want to explain what you do, and you explain when maybe it's a reduction. And this is important. This is really important. You can't trust a person who speaks above your head, and that should not happen. Something else that might happen, and it's actually happened to me, and I talk about it in the book. I interviewed someone and she talked about her medical condition. Now, we were at the swimming pool because I swim every day. So obviously she was there, and it's like part of my life. We're sitting at the swimming pool cafeteria. Her daughter's playing, but she's going to be bored in a minute. So I have very little time. And this person tells me about her medical condition. And I write everything down with horrific mistakes. Horrifics. I misspelled everything but bronchitis, every single thing. So I didn't want to interrupt her. I didn't want to take up the time. I didn't want to cut the flow. I admit, and I'm ashamed of that, I didn't want her to think I'm stupid. You know what? Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I am. So what? I have the right to spell things correctly. So I didn't ask her, and I misspelled everything. And then I went home and I was like, forsythia? That's the name of a bush with yellow flowers. That is not a medical condition. What was I thinking? And I looked it up and I found the medical condition that sounds like forsythia. So I could Google it, but to Google it is really is the last resort. It's not the first resort. The doctor should explain, and we should be able to say, never be ashamed to say, I don't understand the terms you're using. Could you please write them down to me? At least write them down so I can look them up. And if you could explain them in a few words, that would be great.
Yeah. And that's most of the time what I do is I'll eventually just be like, okay, I can't understand a word you're saying, and I need you to explain. What does that mean?
Yes. Yes. And maybe doctors will learn. It's almost like an armor that a healthcare professional can wear, talking above your head. It's like, I am the doctor. They're the doctor. You get that. You're the patient. So what? I teach. When I teach, I'm the professor. They're the students. It's not my job to make them feel dumb. It's my job to have them learn. And I teach. That's my obligation. And when someone asks me a question and I've answered it twice already, I say, that's a great opportunity to answer this again. Let's do it. Let's find another way to explain.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That's a good moment. And then when they get it, that's a good moment. And it's something that healthcare professionals should train themselves in and should be taught to do, really. And you should be able to drill down all the way to the person who wants to read everything in the New England Journal of Medicine. And also to the person who says, I'm not getting any of this. Just explain it to me, give me 2 or 3 sentences that I can go home. That's a good starting point. There are literacy issues. There are I'm freaked out issues. There are medicalese issues. I don't speak medicalese. I only speak English. I speak more languages, but it doesn't help when people are throwing medicalese at you. And this shouldn't be the spoken language at these encounters.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And do the whole Googling thing, when you do searches, how do you distinguish what is an actual accurate site or an inaccurate informational site?
I'm very picky. at the places where I go, really. I do some things that are maybe too academic. I will go on Google Scholar and look for information, and it's publicly available for free. If you have a computer, you have a smartphone, you have Google, and you can punch in Google Scholar, and you can punch in words like systematic review, which is a work where researchers look at all the studies that have been done on a specific topic, and you find what's been done. And if you get it, that's great. If you don't, you can try and get some help in understanding it. But that will be state of the art. What I also do when I don't do Google Scholar is I choose websites that I trust, like Mayo Clinic, for example. I want to know something. I go on Mayo Clinic. Rarely do I feel like they're selling me something. Seriously. Sometimes these things can happen, but very rare. And then I get some credible information. They're not selling me any supplements. They're not making a buck off my answers. They're not linking to, whatever magical cure become blonde into that. Becoming blonde actually is not so difficult, but they're not BSing me, if that's okay to say. They're not commercializing this. I trust them. And that is where I go. And I know that you can go to many places. And we've seen this with COVID, and we've seen many people that claim vehemently that there is no COVID and vaccines are bad and blah, blah, blah. And, is this backed up by science? No. Does it sound convincing? Maybe it does. So that goes back to system one. If it sounds convincing, that's great for system one, but would it stand a test of system two? Would system two say, yes, this is credible information, I should trust it? That's why I really try not to expose myself to this type of information, also because once we learn something, it's very hard to unlearn it. So I would say really pick what you're looking at. Is this science? Is this serious? Is it, what did my friend just teach me? Anecdata? Is it anecdata? Or is it real data, like anecdotal data? Or is it as in, oh, my neighbor smoked and had a beautiful baby? Great. You mean I should smoke now? Like that's, no.
Yeah.
Science tells you things, and some things, life doesn't happen accordingly, but for the most part, it does. And that's a good rule to follow.
Yeah, that sounds like a good rule to follow. And I didn't really know about, because usually when I do Google searches, I just do Google search. I didn't know you could look up like Google Scholar and get actual, more factual information on the science side of things.
Yeah.
Another thing that's pretty important in the patient world is informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so important for medical and health decisions?
It's very important legally. And before it's important legally, it's important ethically. It's important ethically. It has really sad roots. Informed consent wasn't born out of someone having coffee and thinking, oh, that would be a great idea. Rather, it was born out of people running experiments on prisoners, be they war prisoners or just prisoners, injecting them with various things. Oh, that's interesting. What happens if we give them tuberculosis? Will they die? Let's see. Isn't that cool? No, this is horrible. This is horrible. And that's why informed consent was born, out of a realization that people should be aware of what is being done to them and be able to be aware. That's one thing. And be able to say, I don't want this. Don't do this to me. I will not participate. So this is crucially and vitally important. And it's enforced, and that's great. The thing is, sometimes it's enforced and it becomes lip service. So people are given this form like, oh, can you sign this? Yes, you can sign this. Did you read it? Did you have time to read it? Did you understand what it said? No, who cares? Just sign the damn thing. So that's not really informed, though, is it? You're not informed if you haven't read. You're not informed if you haven't been given time, if you haven't had time to say, what does this word mean? Let me look it up. I don't understand. Maybe they're going to take out my leg. I need to know what's going on. I don't want to wake up. Oh, well, who needs to, right? I consented. I signed the form. I mean, I'm joking about it, not because I think it's funny, because it's just so heavy and I could get really, really angry and depressed, or I could do something, and this is me doing something. I'm not taking this lightly at all. And I do think, I wish that informed consent were taken one step further, rather than just being shoved in people's faces and when they're asked to sign, to actually be given to them with some time to ponder and some time to deliberate and the ability to ask questions. But I do think it's a crucially important first step in the way of us becoming more informed and empowered patients. Definitely.
Yeah, I know usually before surgery, they'll like bring all this paperwork in and they'll need you to sign this. And the anesthesiologist will come in and be like, I need you to sign this. And Well, it's right before surgery, so you don't really have time to look it over because you're literally on the bed.
Mhm.
And they've got an IV with the drugs and waiting for you to pass out before you sign the informed consent.
I know the anesthesiologist is going to put you to sleep. Do you want him to also wake you up, or do you want to that's him or her? I know, I agree. You're describing an impossible situation. That's what you're describing right now.
Yeah.
And sadly, it's highly prevalent. I just wrote about it. I wrote a short response to the BMJ with my great colleague, Yannick Renard of the UK. We wrote about his father, actually, who had surgery. And same thing with he's on the bed. He's scared out of his wits. And he's signing the form. Of course he's signing the form. It's not informed at all.
No.
And it keeps on happening. It just keeps on happening.
Yeah, they should really, the day before a surgery, give you all the paperwork so you can ask questions.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't feel rushed because you're sitting on the bed waiting for them to put the IV fluids in you.
That's absolutely true. And both this and a good relationship with a doctor are things that are associated with lawsuits. When you like your doctor, when you feel they care, you are less likely to sue. People who sue often say the doctor didn't explain. The doctor will say, I explained. Did you? Well, the patient clearly didn't understand. And also, if the patient didn't feel that the doctor cared, they're much more likely to sue. My father-in-law lost an eye. Really, he was on blood thinners, and someone operated on his eye. He was on blood thinners. They didn't tell him to stop taking medication prior to that. He lost an eye. I said, you can sue. I wasn't encouraging him. I just said that. And he said, oh, but the doctor hugged me. Okay. That was the answer. And there you have it. And the answer was, I felt that the doctor cared about me. Therefore, I was more forgiving of their mistake, which had cost me an eye. Yes. And I'm sure he was not the only one. And I'm not saying you should sue. You should always sue. It's difficult, and it also, takes up energy. I'm just saying, if doctors and institutions are not in it for the sake of your emotions, they should be in it for the sake of minimizing the risk of lawsuits, which cost money. And money is a language that everybody speaks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I know that in the medical speak, they talk about, statistics and probabilities and frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to explain the differences?
Mm-hmm.
And which way would actually be a better way for patients to get what the doctors are trying to say?
Absolutely, I would love to. So statistics are just the numbers and the calculations that scientists do in order to understand what's happening. Is a treatment working? What's the probability of a treatment working, etc. Probabilities are the numbers that describe how likely something is to happen. For example, if you have a gene for a specific condition, how likely is it that you will develop the disease? Or if you are having a treatment that has some side effects, how likely are you to have the side effects? And now we go back to the caveman or woman, they're where we come from, and they are when our minds were formed and wired. And if you think about it, if you're a cave person and we're going hunting, you're not going to tell your cave buddies there's a 35% chance of me finding something there, or the probability is 0.35. You will say, I went there 20 times, and in 7 times I found something. Now, that is something that you can understand. That is something that a child can understand. You could paint this on the cave walls. You could update this if you went 10 more times and you didn't find anything. The probability changes, and you don't have to be a math whiz to say, I went 30 times and I only found something 7 times, not sure it's that great. So probabilities are percentages, And frequencies give you a reference class, like the amount of times you went hunting or the amount of people who have the gene, and a number. Like out of these people, out of this reference class, out of 1,000 people who have the gene, 7 will develop the condition. And that is 0.7%. 0.7%. What does it mean? I don't know. 0.07%? Big mess. Like nobody understands that intuitively. But if I said instead of 0.07%, if I gave you the frequency and I said out of 10,000 people with this gene, 7 will get ill. Okay, now you can picture a lot of people, a whole lot, not a Rolling Stones concert, but a lot of people. And out of them, 7 have the condition. And now you can say, wow, okay, that's not a lot, but it's still 7 people. It's not 7 out of 1,000,000, it's 7 out of 10,000. What does it mean for me? You know, and this becomes something you can grapple with. And these are frequencies. And there's a lot of work. I did a lot of work on this, and many other people did much more work than I ever will on frequencies, showing that people understand information in frequencies better than they do in probabilities. And the meaning is when the doctor says there's a small likelihood, or there's a 0.something% chance of you developing this, to say, doctor, out of 1,000 people, how many will this happen to? Out of 10,000, 100, how many people will this happen to? That's the frequency. And this really helps. It helps us understand the meaning of the numbers. Whether 7 out of 10,000 is nothing to you or unacceptable to you, only you can determine. But you can't determine this unless you understand the numbers that are being presented to you. That's the whole point. So I don't know how many doctors will understand if you say, give me the frequency, give me the frequentist representation. But if you say, you know, out of 1,000 people, how many will, like me, how many will this thing happen to? They should be able to answer you. They should be able to give you an answer or an approximation. And you should be able to say, okay, so now I understand. And that means I do want this, or I don't want this. It scares me and I'm uninterested, or I want to learn more, etc. And this, you know, it's not informed consent because it's not a sign, it's not a form and you don't have to sign it, but it's being informed. It's being an informed patient. That's the first step to making decisions and choices.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I seem to understand frequencies more than statistics. Statistics are over my head when they try and explain anything that way to me.
But you're not the only one. That's the thing, Sarah. You're not the only one. That is what our minds are comfortable with, really. They're comfortable with. We can visualize it. The fact that you can explain it to a child, it's just intuitive. They'll say, oh, it's not a lot. It's very little. Or, wow, it's, you know, 7,000 out of 10,000. That's a lot. They'll get it. It's just much more intuitive.
Yeah. I know in one of the chapters you talk about an option grid. How would that work? And is it possible to get a hold of one to help us?
Absolutely. So option grids were developed in the UK with Glenn Elwyn, Dr. Glenn Elwyn, who's at Dartmouth, and he's a wonderful physician and he's a leader in the field of shared decision making. You can actually Google and find options grid online. The idea of options grid is almost system one. What option grid does is it helps you compare options. For example, someone hurts their knee, they can do physical therapy or they can do surgery. So that's option one, option two. And then it compares it on a number of parameters that are important to you. So for example, one is speed of recovery, percentages of recovery or likelihood of recovery. And sometimes you might find that they're identical between the surgery and the physical therapy. And then you think, but wait, let me just try physical therapy before I let anyone poke holes in my knee, right? So The idea of options grid is very simple. It just says compare the options on a number of parameters. It definitely simplifies things. It helps the discussion. When someone gives you a 30-page brochure in medicalese about knee surgery, will you understand everything? I know I won't.
Oh,
For sure. So it's a simplification. You can think of it as a helpful simplification. And you can ask your doctor to help you fill it out with you. And I think it may be less daunting than an open-ended question because there's the grid and they can see that it's not going to be something that will take them home the whole day.
That sounds like an easier way to get into System 2 thinking, or a way to transition into System 2 thinking when you're not in the mood to transition into System 2 thinking.
Precisely, Steve. That's a really good observation. I think of it as System 1.5. Like it's a nice in between. It's nice. You can do it, and you're not just saying, "Oh, I like the physical therapist better than the surgeon." You're bringing in more information and more considerations.
that leads me to my next question about patient empowerment.
Mhm.
How can we take steps towards becoming more empowered in our choices, our health choices?
That's a really good question, and I'll answer it, but it has limitations, and I'll get to them in the end. And I'm not
Okay.
going to throw limitations at you to just, like a cold shower, but it's going to be empowering as well. So I think one way is to just understand what you want, what's important for you. Because let's go back to the example with the physical therapy versus surgery. If you're an athlete and you really want to be able to work out, and you know that surgery will debilitate you for 6 weeks, then only you know this. You are the one with a set of priorities here, not the doctor. You know what matters to you. They don't. So you can bring this to the table. You can do things like you mentioned before, of asking, I don't understand this. What does this mean? Can you write this down to me? Not just to receive the information, but also to use something that I developed, and I call it Ask About What Matters. And this is a small but powerful set of questions, which is, what are the risks? Do you ask about things that are offered to you? Right? So what could go wrong? Let's hear about this before I fall in love with this option. What are the benefits? And to how many people will enjoy the benefit? Is it everybody? Is it 15 out of 100? 95 out of 100? Let's hear some numbers here. And the third one, which is really, really good, what are the alternatives? And that's very impactful if you want to be empowered. Your doctor's not going to lie to you, but they might not want to discuss the other option. But if you ask flat out, what are the alternatives, they'll answer. And when they answer, you can make an informed choice afterwards. You can decide, okay, I want this or I don't want this. So risks, benefits, and alternatives. These are some of the things that you can do. More high-level things that you can do is you can actually go on Google Scholar or Mayo Clinic or other Johns Hopkins, really credible websites, and bring information and say, I've read this. What do you think? I know my doctor said, oh, you've turned 50. That was a while ago. You should have a colonoscopy. I said, actually the guidelines have changed. I read it in the Lancet. It was like, okay. Okay. And that was good. So it's not like I was being careless about my health. I did look at the guidelines, and I didn't want to do a colonoscopy, and I realized that I didn't have to, like, do other things instead in order to maintain my health, but not do that. So I made an informed decision based on information. So the more you probe into medical information, the more empowered you are. Although doctors often don't like that. And you might have noticed that they don't like it when you come and you have information. So I said I was going to throw some cold water, like a cold shower at patient empowerment. It's not because I'm evil. It's because I'm very much aware of the limitations of the system. And it's rough. When you go in to see a doctor and they have 7 minutes to see you, 12 minutes to see you, which is a luxury. It's hard. They need to meet you. Maybe it's the first time. They have a lot to learn. They have a lot in your file. You're not just coming in for a social visit, right? You often come with a complaint, something new. They need to order tests. They need to look at your meds, adjust things. It takes time. So the system isn't always very conducive to patient empowerment. It's like a doctor is very likely to cut you off after 12 seconds. And the thing is, if you yak endlessly, if you just talk to your heart's content, you're going to talk for 108 seconds. Like under 2 minutes. Under 2 minutes. No, we won't have that. You can't. I'm sorry. Whoop! Like you start talking and they cut you off.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're impatient. They think they've heard it all. They know, they understand. You talk too slowly. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you're nervous. Maybe you haven't slept because you're finally seeing the doctor. Maybe it was hard to find parking. Maybe you were waiting for 2 hours. Maybe, just random thoughts that may have occurred to you at some point or many points. I don't know. And that is just hard. That's not ideal at all. It's not because doctors are bad. It's because they are under a lot of pressure and because they're not necessarily trained to ask you and to include you in the decision-making process, and they're not necessarily incentivized to do that. So some of it is on the doctor, some of it is on us, and definitely some of it is on the system. I'm not saying this to discourage you at all. I'm a fighter. Girl, I will fight. There's a wall. I'm like, there's got to be a window here somewhere. It's too tall. There must be a ladder. That's the kind of person I am. I'm Israeli. I don't take no for an answer, but it's hard. But it's hard. It is just difficult. It requires a lot of resources. And sometimes there's a wall, there's no window, there's no ladder. You bash your head against the wall. It hurts. End of story. That's it. That's just it. Again, not saying this to discourage, just saying do your best and don't expect things to be ideal, because I would be happy, thrilled for you to send me an email and say, you were wrong, things were ideal. Yay, I'll be the happiest person on earth. But if you can make things a little bit better, that's also a victory.
Yeah, I know how doctors are pressed for time. I mean, I went to my nephrology appointment, and as I was sitting there talking to the doctor, she was being paged like 10 times from her phone.
Okay.
So it was just kind of like, she's like, I'm sorry, it's just been a day.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
She was trying to listen, but the whole time I could hear her phone go, vibrate a bunch of times.
I had a doctor visit recently that probably lasted like the minimum amount of time that you're talking about there. It was really quick in and out. I felt like I could have explained more, but yeah, he was so busy with other patients. It was just, what's wrong with you? Okay, do this. Bye.
Did it help at least?
I don't know. I'm not to get into it too much. I've been dealing with something for a couple of weeks, and I don't know what it is yet. I feel better than I did, but some of my blood levels still aren't right, so we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I wish it weren't the case, really, but you're describing an impossible situation. It's impossible for you and it's impossible for the doctor. I mean, to carry on a conversation, to be involved with a patient and they're being paged 10 times and it's not from their greengrocer, I'm sure. It's about other nephrology patients, and it's just so crucial. Everything is so crucial. It's just too much pressure. It's impossible.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I could definitely tell my doctor was getting frazzled by it and just wanting to try and pay attention, but she had to keep checking her phone. So
Yeah.
it was definitely difficult to watch. I almost felt sorry for her. I was like, what can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not much. And that's my point. There really is not much you can do. And it's frustrating. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, it can be. So I have a question for you. So when someone is first diagnosed with a rare disease, it can be kind of difficult and overwhelming. What's one of the first steps do you think someone who's newly diagnosed should take in deciding what their treatment should be? Yeah, to better understand what they need to do.
Well, I think a number of things. I think one thing is to take a step back, not to decide immediately, because there probably is a lot of information you have to take in, and probably you're not in the best mental shape to understand it, just because it's a shock and everything is new. And it needs some sinking in, to maybe have someone go over everything with you, because it's amazing how two people, even when they're not patients, when they're the relatives, will understand different things and will remember different things as well. Take care of the emotional side. That's a huge one. And it is very, very, very often overlooked. I mean, we were just talking about you seeing physicians, discussing medical issues. Now, did they also have time to ask you, but tell me, how are you feeling emotionally? When you go like that with your hands, Steve, like come see.
Well, it was, I mean, it was quick. It was just, how's your brother doing? Because his brother, one of my older brothers was a patient of his too.
Mhm.
And just a quick check-in. Yeah, he asked, but like I said, it was very quick.
So the emotional aspects are also there, and they require some breathing into. And some people will say, I'll deal with that later when I've understood what's going on. That's fine. It's all good. It's your life, and I'm not going to tell you, what to do. It just is important to take a deep breath and take a moment to consider your priorities. Like I said with the knee surgery. So what's important for me? What matters to me? Who am I as a person? What are my priorities as a person before the diagnosis? And what am I bringing with me to dealing with this condition? I think those are some first steps that are decision related. I also know that there are very good groups and organizations that are related to rare diseases in general and specific conditions in particular. And there's a lot to learn there as well. And there's a lot of information. Just let it sink in, because I think what we're learning in this conversation is that your time with your physician is very precious. There's not a lot of it, and it's precious. And if you, quote unquote, waste it on learning the basics, which shouldn't be like that at all. It's not a word I should ever be using. But if there are things that are more Googleable than others, and they're the more specific things, I always think about this in the context of diabetes. Doctors have to explain diabetes all the time. So if people could read about diabetes elsewhere and then come to the doctor and say, what does it mean about me? Because I also have this morbidity, or I also have that, or I love whatever, or I smoke. What does it mean about me? That could be a more meaningful conversation. And I guess that's part of what we can do, is to make sure that the more general stuff we learn ahead of time, prior to our second meeting with the doctor, after we've been, struck with a diagnosis.
I know in parts of your book you talk about having a patient advocate. What do you think that would that be, like a social worker, or would that be something else?
I think we need someone who cares about us. It doesn't have to be a social worker. It can be a sister. I wish I had sisters, or brothers for that matter. A friend, a neighbor, a partner, a daughter, someone you trust, who cares about you, who can go with you. It's very common in deliveries, actually. You have a doula, and the doula will watch your back. I mean, it's not exactly your back she's watching, but she'll watch out for you. And she'll say, no, she didn't want the intervention. Do we have to have it? Can we wait? And things like that. Or what did you just say, doctor? Or my friend didn't understand that term. Could you repeat that? Could I write it down for you? And that's very important. Some medical programs do that. In UCSF, they do that for breast cancer patients. They used to have pre-med students, I think they still do, who will contact the patient prior to the doctor's visit and say, what are your questions? What do you want to ask the doctor? What's important for you? And they write it down. And to be honest, you don't have to be pre-med for this. You can just be a nice neighbor. That's it. And you write a list of questions and you go to the visit with a person and you say, but remember, you wanted to ask about your exercise because you love tennis. Can you do it? Will you be able to do it after the surgery? You had questions, and it's important. It's so discombobulating. The doctor's visit can be so discombobulating that it's really important to have someone with you who grounds you, who helps you, who brings your questions. You're the boss of this. It's your body. Maybe you hate tennis. You don't want to ask about tennis, right? But it has to be about the things that matter to you, but someone who helps you in this moment of anxiety, of confusion, of deference to the doctor, who has your back. And it's everybody, by the way. I'm a psychology professor, right? You think I don't get confused when I go see the doctor? Of course I do. When I go with my mom and she's anxious and she takes a really long time walking because she's old and she's sweet, and everything is so hard that it's very easy to forget. It's very easy to be confused. You really need someone to just be there for you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I know our mom. So when I got my kidney transplant, she actually retired the day I went in for surgery. She's like, okay, I'm retiring. I gotta take care of my kid, kind of thing. So she retired, and she was pretty much by my side the whole time. And she was joking with me. She's like, yeah, I'm pretty much your momager. I'm like, where did you get that term from? And she's like, I watch the Kardashians. And I just started laughing. I'm like, oh,
there should be a show about you. I'd watch it. I'd watch it.
Yeah. She is. She took on an active role when we got diagnosed. She did paperwork. She made insurance calls. She had whole sets of files on both of us, and she would make her daily calls every day. She still does it. She makes daily calls every day to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And if we need to do this paperwork and, to get further on assistance of some type, or this paperwork, or she checked in to see how our health is because she knows that we have to take care of it now.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps her cope, because even though we're adults and we do most of the things ourselves, it keeps her busy, her mind busy. She's got some anxiety from years and years of dealing with our rare disease issues. Yeah. So, it helps her cope to help us out or check up on us to make sure we're do we need more meds? Do we have we went to the doctor? Do we did you make a list of things you want to say? Yeah, she'll be like, well, you're going to the doctor. Are you going to ask him this? Are you going to ask him this? What are you going to ask him?
Yeah.
That's very cool. But you're very lucky. You're very, very lucky.
My mom does
really
that too. I'm terrible. I'm terrible sometimes because I get really frustrated because there's that side where like you want to do a lot of it yourself, but then at the same time, when I get sick and I don't really feel like doing anything, she picks up the slack for me, and I'd say even sometimes when I don't want her help, I need her help, and we work more like a team than I do like completely I'm not definitely not completely independent.
Yeah. You're describing the caregiving dance.
Yeah.
So it can get very, very clunky and difficult. And really,
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
no, it's just I'm saying a lot of us get to dance it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. That goes into my next question. What's one way to help the doctor-patient relationship, like when you're going in, how can you make it go smoother so that you're not they don't feel like you're wasting their time, or
Mhm.
or how can how can you make the relationship better between doctors and patients when you go into your appointment? What's one thing that maybe I could do to help the doctor out and not feel like I'm just wasting his time? The questions I'm asking, he's already answered in the previous appointment and I had forgotten, or something like that.
I think there are two levels here. On the informational level, there's be concise, because their time is extremely valuable, and also in your best interest. You want to get to the point very quickly because you want them to hear the point before their phone pings. If you forgot, you can just acknowledge that and say and apologize and say, I know, but I was overwhelmed. Could you please repeat this quickly? That's fine. That's not like I was disrespectful of your time. It's just I was overwhelmed, and these things do happen. Ask them how they are. They will probably not answer at length, but I think they'll appreciate it, that you care, that you see them. That really matters. I don't know if you have a relationship with your doctor, like if it's a while that you see them, and I feel that when this happens, it becomes very precious. Especially if you're nice and you're polite. Sometimes just mere politeness goes a long way. Just please and thank you. It means a lot. My doctor lets me WhatsApp him, and I don't abuse that. I will do that briefly, and I always thank him, and I will send him a flower, like something, just to say, I see you. And my mom sometimes calls him and said, Mom, if it's about the meds, let me take care of it. Don't call him, please. He's very busy, because he is. And I want to reserve the right to WhatsApp him when I need something, but not when when I need something and he answers. So this becomes, there's a reciprocity here. He knows I'm mindful and respectful of his time, and then he answers, because he knows if I'm asking for something, it's not meaningless. Obviously, this takes time and a level of knowing one another to get there. And I know we can get very frustrated by the time we see the doctor. They're frustrated too. Let's just take a deep breath and go in and say, I'm going to make the most of this. I'm going to make the most of this. I have 7 minutes. I'm not going to waste 47 seconds about saying it took so long to come and see you. They know. They're frustrated as well. These are small things, really. This isn't rocket science, but it's meaningful. It can set the tone for a meeting. And it is meaningful. And it is meaningful not just in a warm and fuzzy sort of way, but really we need that relationship with our healthcare professionals in order to trust them, in order to adhere to the treatments they prescribe us, in order to go along with what they offer, in order to be able to say, I tried this and it didn't work out. Can we do something else? Because this was really causing me to be very jittery. Okay. It doesn't take long to say, and it doesn't sound like a long-winded complaint. And there's a we here, there's a partnership. And it helps. I think it helps. It helps everybody, by the way. It really does. If you can feel it, it's helpful. It's meaningful. They really do try to do their best. None of us envy them, the pressures they're under. We can help them.
Yeah, especially during these last few years with the pandemic and all the stress and stuff
Yes,
that's put on them.
absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. It highlighted something that was there all along and exacerbated it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, doctors, I noticed these past few years that doctors and nurses have been coming burned out and they're quitting, and some patients aren't helping the matter when they're saying they don't think they have what they have, and it's just making it worse. And then, really, who does the doctor or nurse have to go to when they feel depressed or anxiety ridden or burned out?
Yeah. That's a good question. The answer is oftentimes nobody. Sometimes there are interventions, sometimes they're good. Sometimes the doctors get to learn about them, sometimes less so. And I actually wrote about it. I found it incredibly frustrating. There was a children's ward, I'm not sure if it was oncology, but they would take care of children. Sometimes a child would die, and that's really difficult. And they had debriefing procedures, but they didn't really emphasize it. They didn't really publicize this. So doctors were less likely to go. And this really becomes a cultural thing. So when we were chatting before we started recording, I said I didn't think I would care about healthcare systems. Like, it's a big topic and it's really not my thing, but apparently it is, because you can't expect doctors to have time for you if they're not given time. You can't expect them to not be burnt out if they are overworked, if they have administrative burden, which is inhuman, if they do not receive any interventions that will help them recover. And it's not on them. I mean, the whole culture of let's do mindfulness, etc. It's nice, but it's a Band-Aid. You can't say work insane hours, do administrative load through the roof, and then do mindfulness. This is hypocrisy. This is like mindfulness washing. It's you slap it on. I've got nothing against mindfulness. It could be any other type of intervention or wellness thing that is thrown at physicians, and it's great, and nurses, it's great, but the everyday needs to be, I can't even say it, more bearable. Now, how lousy is that? More bearable. It needs to be good. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to be something that people who go into medicine and slave for so many years want to wake up in the morning and start another day. So that's not on me. That's not on you. That's not on our doctors. It is on the healthcare system. It benefits everybody. It really does. It has no downsides other than perhaps financial downsides and just finding more doctors and finding more hours. But yeah, I think that's the key.
Yeah, definitely. Seems like there needs to be lots of systemic changes.
Yes.
So there's a part of your book where you focused a lot on dealing with death.
Mm-hmm.
And question we had was, why is it so important to discuss end of life preferences, and not just when someone has a illness that might cause them to die, but and just over a lifetime, over and over again.
Yes. We're gonna die one day in our beds, happy, with no disease before that, just angelic, not waking up at the age of 108. Maybe that could be the case or not. I don't know. Who's to know? I'm not a crystal ball reader. What I do know is that everyone dies eventually. And we don't know when that's going to happen. And we don't know how that's going to happen. And we don't know the decisions that it's going to involve. And in many, many cases, these decisions will not be made by us. They will be made by people who love us and want what's best for us. But what is best for us? You know, we were talking about patients' preferences, and only you know what you want. So only you know what you want around a time where you might be debilitated, where you might be close to death, but not dead. And people can stay in that very uncomfortable place for a long time. What would we want to be done with us? Do we want to be fed? Do we want to be intubated? What are our wishes? It's the kind of thing that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it. And you've read my book, and you know the doctors don't want to talk about it with dying patients. Dying patients don't want to talk about it with their family because it will upset them, and vice versa. So it's like, let's not talk about it. Okay, this would be great if it meant that people never suffered and never died, but this is not the case. And people do suffer and people do die. And people sometimes go to their deaths with way too many interventions to their own liking. It's not my call to make. It's their own. Too many interventions. Doctors trying again and again and again. And they could say, you know, there's very, very little chance of this working. Actually, it will probably not work. Actually, I'm operating on you now, and I kind of know it won't help you. But I really like you, and I find it very hard to say, you know, Mr. X, this is the end of the line. I can't help you anymore. I'm really sorry. I did my absolute best. What would you want to do now? And if Mr. X still wanted the surgery, they would have the surgery. But if Mr. X used my set of questions and asked about the surgery, what are the risks? Well, here's a long list. What are the benefits? Here's a shorter list. What are the alternatives? The alternative can be palliative care, where a person is walked to their death, to their inevitable death, in a way that tries to remove pain from the equation and stops medical treatments. And to go there is difficult because people interpret it as I'm giving up hope. Well, the truth is there is no hope. You're just being realistic and you're relieving your loved one of pain. And the easier way to do this is if you know that your loved one would have wanted it. And the only way to know what your loved one wants is if we talk about it. So I offered something that's very counterintuitive. I offered something that I called TAD, Talk About Death. And I suggested to do it like the day before a milestone birthday. Those big ones, the 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, because we note them. They're heavy. And they make us ponder. And there's a lot of academic work on this, mine and others, that people really do a lot of processing around milestone birthdays. So the day before you have the party, sit around with your loved ones and say, you know, I want to try every possible intervention, or, you know, I would like to die peacefully. This is what dying peacefully would mean for me. I would appreciate it if you didn't intubate me, if you didn't feed me. That's what I want. Do it for me. And it's a hard conversation to have, but it makes life a lot easier in the end when you know that this is what the person wanted, that you're following their wishes. You are helping them do what they wanted in a moment where they can no longer follow their own desires and wants. I know it doesn't sound like fun. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not fun. It can be a very meaningful 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That can actually change your life. And everyone has a milestone birthday every once in a while. It becomes just a conversation. It becomes something you talk about. Because if you're an adult, you know that things can happen. I mean, this is not something to talk about when I'm 79, because what if I get run over tomorrow? God forbid.
Yeah.
You know, could happen. Who's to guarantee that's not going to happen?
Yeah. No, I definitely think you're right. I've had dealt with death on and off a lot through my life in different ways, and it makes it easier when the person who's passing away knows what they want, and they express that to you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like the culmination of really having patients speak their mind. Everything we talked about. Be informed, be empowered, express your preferences, understand your chances, understand the language, and say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. Help me. I think that's an amazing way to go. That's an amazing way to go, really. It's a gift that we can give our loved ones by speaking, by not pretending, like, let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, giving them somewhat of a peace of mind when they have so many other decisions to make when you're on your final days.
Yeah. Even to know that you're on your final days is meaningful. You can make decisions, you can say what you want, what you need financially, say goodbye to people, just pretending like it's going to go on forever. It doesn't help. Yeah, it's a depressing note to end the show on. I realize that. I know that. I apologize.
Oh, no, we made the question, so it's not your fault.
You did.
Well, it's something that us as a community as a community with cystinosis have thought about. They don't, not many people say they've thought about it. I've thought about it, what I would do,
Mhm.
and and what I would want. So I've thought about it, and of course I haven't talked to my parents or anyone about it. I've talked to Sarah about it, and that's about it, because it's a hard conversation to have with your parents, especially if you're still, when you're still alive. They don't want to talk about us passing away, especially if you have a rare disease, because you really don't know how long you're going to live. And I know that in our community, they don't really like to talk about events that could lead up to our death, because I think they want us to always be filled with hope that we're going to be healthy, but we're not going to have a lot of trials or surgeries in our life. But us as patients know that's not the truth. The truth is we probably will have surgeries. We probably will have health trials in our life that won't be fun or easy. So I think having this conversation or ending it on this note will hopefully bring more people open and willing to talk about this.
And willing to listen. I
Yeah.
think it's very honest when you say, I think about this. It's just very honest. And in a way, it's something I talk about with my mom. It's something I talk about with my friends. My mom tells me what she wants, and she finds, I think, a great consolation in the fact that I know what she wants. And she wants to not suffer, and may I be able to help her not suffer. And it's an honest conversation, and it really, really helps me. I mean, I hope she just really passes in her bed at the age of 108. That would be fantastic. I would absolutely be thrilled. I don't know. But if there comes a point where I have to tell the doctor, just let my mom be. Let's just make her not suffer. I will know full-heartedly that this is what she wants. And this is, I think, a gift, kind of a gift that we can give to one another, of knowing what we want. And the fact that we have these thoughts, we deserve to voice them. We deserve to have them be heard. And it's, I think, less terrible to just have the discussion. Obviously, your loved ones don't like to feel helpless, but we do get to be helpless at some point. We can't stop every suffering. We can't fix everything. So at least knowing what the person wants is another form of being helpful, of not being helpless, because you know this is what they want, and I'm doing it for them. And that's for real patient empowerment, really.
Yeah.
May not
Yeah.
look like the posters for patient empowerment, but it is.
Yeah. It definitely helps to talk about it, but you know, it's still a tough.
Yes.
It's still a tough subject. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
definitely is. I always like the Day of the Dead way of thinking about death, like so us, like it being like a celebration of life. And that idea is really appealing, especially, I mean, obviously not all the time is it a long life, but just appreciating the moments that
Mhm.
people have had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. I agree. I think this is who we are. If we can be who we are till the end, that's a blessing. It really is. And talking about it and expressing our wants and needs and being informed definitely helps us being there to the fullest. If we want that, if we prefer not to know, if we prefer not to talk, you know, nobody can force us. Nobody should force us. But if we want to talk, we should have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely. I did write about it at length. There's an entire chapter in my book on end of life discussions and end of life in general, because I feel it's crucial, and I feel that these are moments when we are less empowered than in other moments, and it's meaningful. It can be really meaningful, and it can be a good way to end a life and a podcast, and that's all good. So I'm sure you have podcast notes, and the name of the book is Your Life Depends on It. If you want to take a picture, what you can do to make better choices about your health. And I would be really happy if you read it, and I would be happy if you told me what you thought about it. My email is Talya Miron-Shatz @gmail.com. Talya is with a Y, Miron, MIRON SHATZ @gmail.com.
And the book, can it be found on like Amazon or?
Yes,
Like,
for sure. And you can use my name also. It's TalyaMiron-Shatz.com. You can find their information about the book, a lot of interviews, a lot of webinars, a lot of interesting information about medical decision making. And you're most welcome to it. It's a free resource, and I'm thrilled to have people use it. So it's TalyaMiron-Shatz.com. And it's there for you.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for being a guest on our podcast and having an honest and open discussion about some subjects that, you know, we don't always get to discuss.
Yeah.
Or, you know, is uncomfortable to talk about.
Thank you for having me and starting this conversation.